She was no longer Queen of France in 1793, 4 years after the French Revolution began. King Louis XVI, her husband, had been put to death for crimes against France, and she had also been given the death sentence after a short trial. It is said that she gladly went to the guillotine even though she was locked up, separated from her children, and made to feel bad by her captors. The hand that fate dealt this woman had brought her down from the high life she had once lived. This is the story of how Marie Antoinette died. Marie Antoinette's death, from beloved princess to despised queen. At the time, Marie Antoinette was a young Austrian princess who had recently arrived in France. The French were captivated by her inherent grace and charm, which won them over. On the other hand, as time went on, her reputation became tarnished by a number of scandals, some of which were true while others were not. Marie Antoinette's passing was influenced by a number of different elements interacting with one another. She was responsible for some of them, while others were beyond her ability to manage. An example of this would be the fact that Marie Antoinette's husband, Louis, was unable to have sexual relations with her until he underwent a relatively minor medical surgery. As a result, their marriage was unsuccessful for the first 8 years of their marriage. In an effort to avoid having to confront the difficulties she was experiencing in her marriage, Marie Antoinette resorted to a life of frivolity, which included dancing, gambling, and spending money on fashion. It is very clear that this did not in any way endear her to her people. In addition to these circumstances, harsh defamation was another aspect that contributed to the public's hatred of Marie Antoinette. Her intimate relationships with other women resulted in lesbian liaisons, and she was even wrongly accused of having sexual relations with other women. Marie Antoinette was the most loathed woman in France at the time of her death in 1793. She had been this way for a long time. The affair of the diamond necklace. The affair of the diamond necklace was one of the worst scams that turned French public opinion against Marie Antoinette for good. It didn't matter that the French queen was innocent. Her name was already in bad shape after this. A diamond necklace worth 1.6 million livres was made in Paris for King Louis XV's lover, Madame du Barry, in 1785. The Comtesse de la Motte planned to steal it. The king had died, though, before the piece was finished. They tried to sell the necklace to Marie Antoinette, but she didn't like it. The jewelers were already deeply in debt at this point. The Comtesse's plan was to dress up a prostitute as the queen and give her to the Cardinal de Rohan, who was no longer liked by Marie Antoinette or her mother, Maria Theresa, Empress of Austria. The fake met Cardinal de Rohan at night and told him that the king would like him again if he bought her this necklace. He said he would pay for the piece in payments. When the cardinal didn't pay the first part, the watchmaker sought help from the queen. The whole plan was found out, and the Comtesse and her helpers were punished appropriately. Unfortunately for Marie Antoinette, even though she wasn't involved in this affair, it only added to the public's perception that she spent a lot of money. The affair with the diamond necklace played a part in Marie Antoinette's death. The March on Versailles. By October 5, 1789, the impoverished women of Paris had reached their breaking point. They marched toward the royal palace in Versailles, which was fueled by the lack of bread, which prevented them from being able to provide for their families, as well as stories of sumptuous feasts that were thrown by the royal family for military troops. A throng of 7,000 people gathered outside the palace and asked that the royal family return to Paris. The king grudgingly agreed to the demand, but the crowd was adamant that they do so. After this occurrence, the queen and her family were placed under house imprisonment at the Tuileries, and Marie Antoinette's death would not occur for another 4 years after this event. Flight to Varennes and arrest. The French royal family tried to leave Paris on June 20th, 1791. Marie Antoinette, King Louis XVI, and their 3 children put on masks and ran away from the Tuileries at midnight with the help of Count Axel de Fersen, who loved the queen very much. They were going to the Austrian Netherlands, which was about 200 miles away. People say that Marie Antoinette made a deadly mistake when she thought about the Count's plan to escape. So that the trip could go faster, he wanted the family to split up and ride in 2 cars. They had to travel together because the Queen said so. They missed their meeting with their armed guard because this bigger carriage was slow and heavy. Marie Antoinette's death was partly caused by this terrible choice. The National Guard had already heard that the royal family had escaped, but they were stopped on their way. The royal family was taken back to Paris while being watched closely. The trip took 4 long days in very hot weather. During one of their overnight stays in a place called La Ferté, the king and queen were given ways to get out of the inn where they were put up. The two of them refused and swore they would stay together no matter what. Marie Antoinette's imprisonment. Marie Antoinette was taken back to the Tuileries, where she was said to have kept up her queenly, formal behavior. Some people liked this, while others just saw it as proof of how haughty they thought she was. On August 13, 1792, the Queen of France was taken to the Temple. 5 weeks after that, the empire ended. The royal family lived in the small tower of the temple. They could still enjoy some of the comforts they were used to, like good food and wine, new clothes, clean beds, and books to read. The queen could even bring one of her favorite dogs into her rooms with her. The next month, Marie Antoinette saw how terrible things really were when her close friend, the Princess de Lamballe, was killed, and her head was put on a spike outside the queen's windows. The queen passed out. It was said that she cried the whole night after she got better. The royal family was moved again in October 1792, this time to the Great Tower of the Temple. Even with the problems, they were still able to live in a good way. Their rooms had walls and a toilet that flushed, and their food was served on silverware. The French National Convention found King Louis XVI of France guilty of plotting with other countries on January 20th, 1793. He said his last goodbyes to his queen and their children and was put to death the next day by the guillotine. The end for Marie Antoinette could not come soon enough. Marie Antoinette's final days. In light of the fact that she was no longer the Queen of France, Marie Antoinette was now known as the Widow Capet. The name Capet was the name of a French royal house that governed during the medieval period. Her spouse was a member of this royal house, and it was the one from which he derived. At this point in time, Marie Antoinette was 37 years old. As a consequence of the pain and anguish that she had endured ever since the beginning of the French Revolution, her health had significantly worsened at this point in time that she was in. She had a small build, her hair was white, and she was now wearing an outfit consisting of black and white simple apparel. As a result of the passing of her husband, she was left in a condition of profound depression. The only thing she had left at this point was her children. It was the year that the revolution began that her eldest son, the Dauphin, had passed away from disease, and one of her daughters had passed away when she was still an infant. Her younger son, Louis Charles, and her eldest daughter, Marie-Thérèse, were the only beneficiaries of this situation. The former French queen was dealt a further blow when her son, Louis Charles, was taken away from her, and she was taken away from her daughter and brought to the Conciergerie on August 2nd, 1793. Both of these events occurred on the same day. After a 2-day trial, Marie Antoinette was found guilty of treason and sentenced to death by guillotine. Prior to this trial, the need for Marie Antoinette's death had been debated, but now it was decided. On October 16, 1793, she composed her testament and last words, in which she wrote, "I have just been condemned to death, not to a shameful death that can only be for criminals. I am calm, as people are whose conscience is clear. My deepest regret is having to abandon our poor children. I only lived for them." Marie Antoinette's death. When Marie Antoinette's maid came to check on her at 7 a.m. on the same day, she found her lying on her bed with her hand on her cheek and her back to the window. She wore a black dress. Besides a few sips of soup, she wouldn't eat anything. Her guards were there to watch her as she changed into a regular white dress at 8 o'clock. The executioner then took care of her and cut off her hair with his scissors. Marie Antoinette made a hat for herself to wear over her head. Next, her hands were tied behind her back. She had to ask to be freed so she could go to the bathroom in a corner. At 11 a.m., the trip to the place where she would be killed started. Some people made Marie Antoinette sit on the back of a cart that would take her to her death. The cart moved once, and she almost fell out. The parade finally got to the Place de la Concorde. People in the crowd made fun of and insulted Marie Antoinette, but she didn't care because she had been through it all in jail and kept her head held high. Some people who saw her said she was a respectable woman, while her enemies said she was still haughty. As Marie Antoinette walked up the stairs to the gallows, she stepped on the foot of the man who was going to kill her. She was a lady until the end, and she told him she was sorry. Her last words were, "I did not do it on purpose." At 15 minutes past noon, the former Queen of France lost her mind. It was now official that Marie Antoinette had died. Madame Tussaud was able to make a wax figure of Marie Antoinette's face while the gravediggers ate their lunch. Along with her body, it had been left alone on the grass. The body and head were both buried together in a group grave. However, Marie Antoinette was finally buried in a way that fit a queen, but it took 22 years. During the Bourbon Restoration, she was buried as a Christian. She and her king are buried with other French royal families in the Basilica of Saint Denis in Paris. We hope you liked this video. Subscribe to the channel if you're a history addict, and please let us know about what civilization or time period we should talk about. Also, watch another video here.